Charlie, are you ready? Everybody ready up and down the road here? Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Good morning. Welcome to today's hearing entitled A Review of NASA's Space Launch System. In front of you, of course, are the same packets containing the written testimony, biography, and truth in testimony disclosure for today's witness, Administrator Charles F. Bolden. And we will have opening statements. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for my opening statement. Good morning, everyone, and today's hearing is entitled A Review of NASA's Space Launch System, and our witness is NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden. As a preface to the formal portion of my statement, I want to first congratulate all the men and women at NASA and its contractors for the successful launch of STS-135. The shuttle launch was viewed by tens of thousands of people on hand in Florida and millions more around the world, including a packed crowd in this hearing room, and it was a bittersweet moment to watch the last flight of the shuttle Atlantis lift off from Kennedy Space Center. General, your team did an outstanding job, and we all look forward to welcoming this crew safely home, probably sometime next week. Several weeks ago, as our committee began planning for this hearing, we had every expectation that NASA would have announced its space launch system architecture well before today, with the goal that the committee members would have the opportunity to ask questions regarding cost, schedule, capabilities, and the like. Indications we had received from NASA throughout the spring clearly suggested that a decision would have been rendered prior to today. Sadly, such is not the case. 9 months ago, the President signed the NASA Authorization Act. Provisions in the bill clearly directed NASA to provide us with decisions, to tell Congress of their decisions on the selection of the crew vehicle and the launch system designed by January 9th, 2011. That date was considered attainable given the previous investment and substantial progress made by NASA in vehicle engineering, design, and demonstration that had already been achieved by the Constellation program. The Act also included the goal of reaching operational capability for the core elements not later than December 31st, 2016, because that date seemed realistic for the now canceled Constellation system, and it also reflected Congress' deep concern that we needed to have a backup capability in place should commercial launch vehicles fail to materialize. Instead, on January 15th, Congress received a, quote, preliminary report, unquote, that emphasized its selection of prototype vehicle designs, but did not commit the agency to their construction. The report was careful to note, and I quote, and I do quote, NASA hopes to finalize its acquisition decisions as early as spring of 2011. Details that will be included in a follow-on report to Congress, unquote. We're well into summer, and no such report's been sent. So today, 6 months later, and with the final space shuttle mission now underway, instead of an informed discussion on the attributes and trades of the selection of a space launch system, we'll be left with little more than an explanation of decision-making processes still to be completed. Our letter of invitation asks you, Charlie, to describe the design of the launch system, how much it would cost, the budget profile, its performance, when it'd be ready, and the types of missions it would enable. General Bolden, the fact that we do not have a final decision on the SLS and the supporting documents that the invitation letter request represents almost an insult to this committee and to Congress. We'll try to do our very best throughout this hearing to accommodate the agency's failure and the failure of the White House to answer congressional requests and to give us the information that we're entitled to have. But to be clear, this failure reflects poorly on the administration and its space program. I can't help but feel that this administration has let down the thousands of men and women who have devoted their career to the space program, as well as heroes such as Neil Armstrong, Mike Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Gene Cernan, Tom Stafford, and they go on, and many, many others, known well to all of us. who risked their lives blazing the trail of space exploration, and some who lost their lives, and others who continue to maintain an unwavering dedication and devotion to the cause. We have a record littered with requests by Congress for information over the last 2 years. We've waited for answers that have not come. We've pleaded for answers that have not come. We've done our best to be fair with you and with this president, who set out to delay the next step in our nation's human space exploration program, and by doing so has jeopardized the space station in the process. It's a shame that for many of us that simply want to preserve, protect, and defend our leadership in space. That's all we ask for. That's what we want, that we see NASA paying for rides to the space station from countries that may not have our best interest at heart. We've run out of patience. I realize and I believe that you're the person who has to bear the brunt of this president's bad decisions. I would like to believe you've told him what he ought to do, and I'd like to believe that he didn't pay any attention to you. The White House has done you wrong, but nonetheless, you have to answer for these continued failures. I'd like to point out today that this committee reserves the right to open an investigation into these continued delays and join the investigation initiated by the Senate. It's a shame we have to even consider or be thinking about doing that. Moving forward, I think it's important to note that we support all of the people engaged in developing the next heavy lift vehicle, as well as those who are working on the commercial cargo and crew contracts. People who are working every day to keep America at the forefront of human space flight. If these engineers, these technicians and scientists who, despite the absence of good leadership from the White House, strive to dream big and carry on the legacy of these that came before us, before them and before us. I now recognize the gentlelady from Texas for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and let me welcome you, Administrator Bolden. I want to congratulate you and the entire shuttle team on the truly spectacular launch of the Space Shuttle Atlantis. I watched by video right here in this room last Friday, and I can assure you that the room was packed with enthusiastic supporters of all ages. And I know I speak for all of my colleagues when I say that we wish the crew of Atlantis a safe and successful mission. As you know, you have been called to testify on NASA's plans to develop the vehicles that will enable future human exploration beyond low Earth orbit, vehicles that have been authorized and funded by Congress. However, as you also know, and will testify today, that you still don't have an approved plan to share with us. As a result, I expect that you will be on the receiving end of a lot of unhappiness and irritation expressed by many members here today, and that includes me. It's unfortunate because the fault doesn't lie with you. It is my understanding that you've had a plan ready to announce for some time, but you haven't been able to get the final okay to make it public. And that said, it is now past time for a decision and a plan to be announced. 3 successive NASA authorization acts enacted by Democratic and Republican Congresses and presidents alike over the past 6 years have directed NASA to undertake a program of human exploration beyond low Earth orbit. And the most recent of those authorization acts directed NASA to move expeditiously to develop the heavy lift launch vehicle and crew capsule needed to enable those exploration missions, as well as to provide backup capability and support of the International Space Station. In short, Congress is not asking NASA to build a rocket without a mission, as some have claimed. Instead, we're asking NASA to build a system this nation will need to carry out the exploration program authorized by successive Congresses and presidents. As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, the shuttle program is drawing to a close. There are many talented men and women who have worked on that program and on the now canceled Constellation program who want to continue to contribute to our nation's leadership in space exploration. but they don't know what, if anything, is going to be there for them to work on in the coming years. They are impressively young people, students, some of whom were here last week, looking with so much inspiration and hope in their eyes. But now we don't know whether there's even going to be a human space flight program when they get out of school. I even talked with some about their wishes of becoming an astronaut. And there are our international partners who wonder why the United States appears to be adrift and ready to walk away from its global leadership in human space flight. I suspect that this state of affairs pains you as much as it does me. But I've been around long enough to believe that we can do better, and I think that you believe that we can do it better as well. So I hope that when this hearing is over, you will strongly convey to those in administration who are dithering and that it is time to move forward and let NASA get on with the task that the nation had asked to be undertaken. I have been asked by many news outlets about the future, and sitting on this committee, they certainly expect me to know the answer, but I do not. At this critical juncture, we need to move ahead expeditiously to build the Space Launch System and multi-purpose crew vehicle in a way that makes use of the human space flight skills and knowledgeable base that NASA has worked so hard to achieve over the years, and to inspire the next generation of explorers, engineers, and scientists. I firmly believe that if we lose this talent, it won't be just to another state or another agency, it'll be to another country. And to those of my colleagues on the majority side who are critical of the administration's stewardship of NASA, I also hope that you will convey to your colleagues in Congress that NASA cannot do what we've been asked to do if its budget keeps getting cut. The proposed House CJS appropriations level for NASA is one that, if enacted, will simply add more stress to an agency and dedicated workforce that is already trying to do more with less. And at the end of the day, put America on a path to relinquish its space leadership. I would hate for that to happen, and I don't believe that you want it to happen as well. But we all need to recognize that votes on funding have consequences. Chairman Hall, I'm so glad that you're supportive of this program, and I appreciate you calling this hearing today. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And I thank you for your good opening remarks. And I agree with you on budget cuts. And I'm going to take advantage of being the chairman to make a statement. Sometime many years ago when I was a Democrat, and I was a ranking Democrat, and I think Mr. Sensenbrenner might have been the chairman then, the Republican chairman. Al Gore, who was vice president, told us we had to cut the budget 25%. He told everyone that. And I talked to Al, and I said, I doubt seriously that the chairman nor do I know how to cut the budget on people whose lives are endangered. Who could we get to help us? And I think he suggested Chairman Bolden, I believe, was the administrator at that time. And we talked to him and told him it had to have a 25% cut. This is just my recollection. I can be wrong because I'm 88 years old and I wake up every morning in kind of a new world sometimes. But I remember this conversation very well when we asked Mr. Bolden, and he said yes, he would cut it. Mr. Bolden did cut it, but he didn't cut it 25%. He cut it 34%. And really and truly, NASA hadn't been the same since that time. So you can have too dang many cuts. And I'm like that senator that said, don't tax me, tax that man behind the tree. Yeah. They cut the wrong budget, and we're suffering from it today. We've got to work together and try to work our way out of it. I thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your statement. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. And at this time, yes.
Before we proceed,
go ahead. Sure.
I'd like to ask unanimous consent that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee be allowed to sit on the dais today and participate in questions. She hasn't arrived yet, but she made this request after our committee members finish their questions.
When she gets here, we'll let her sit down
Thank you.
and let her ask questions
Okay.
after our members. Okay. At this time, I'd like to introduce our witness, Charles F. Bolden, Jr., a friend of mine for a lot of years, a man I've admired and respected. Was appointed NASA administrator by President Obama and sworn in on July 17, 2009. He's an astronaut, having flown on 4 shuttle missions, including the mission that deployed the Hubble Space Telescope. Prior to being appointed administrator, Mr. Bolden served in the United States Marine Corps for 34 years. During his service, he was an aviator, having flown 100 missions in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. And he was a test pilot. He held a number of commands. Mr. Bolden retired from the Corps with the rank of Major General. He's a true patriot. We're glad to have him before us here today. And I welcome you, Charlie.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. You and members of the committee, I thank you all for the opportunity to appear here today to discuss the future of NASA's human space flight program, a future that I believe is very bright. And before I continue with my formal comments, I do have to say, you have the correct person here to cast blame. I want to make that very clear. I really appreciate everybody's continuing willingness to excuse me for our shortcomings, but it's really important for everybody on this committee and everybody watching this hearing to understand that I am the leader of America's space program. I am the leader of the greatest space program in the world today, and so I'm here in that capacity to testify and to try to be as honest and open as I can with you and answer as many questions as I can. I understand everybody's frustration, but you have the right guy here to criticize. It's not the president, it's me. Our new system will stand on the shoulders of the successful shuttle program to which thousands of American men and women have contributed their passion and expertise to ensure America's preeminence in space exploration. I appear before you today 4 days after an historic milestone, after a historic milestone in America's spaceflight program, the launch of Atlantis on the STS-135 mission, the final flight of the shuttle program. The brave men and women of STS-135 safely docked with the International Space Station on Sunday, joining the list of dozens of American astronauts who have been living and working in space continuously for the past decade aboard the orbiting outpost. The station is the pinnacle of our current achievement, a stepping stone to the rest of our solar system. Some say that this final shuttle mission will mark the end of America's 50 years of dominance in human spaceflight. As a former astronaut and the current NASA administrator, I'm here to tell you that American leadership in space will continue for at least the next half century because we've laid the foundation for success. And as we say at NASA, failure is not an option. The NASA Authorization Act of 2010 gave NASA a clear direction, and in line with our 2011 appropriations bill, we're moving aggressively and enthusiastically to plan future exploration. We appreciate the significant bipartisan effort behind the law and look forward to working with you to shape a promising future for human spaceflight. Our post-shuttle human spaceflight plan also focuses on utilization and operation of the ISS, establishing a U.S. commercial cargo and crew capability to reach this national laboratory, and making critical prioritized investments in the technologies that will help us win the future. We have to get out of the business of owning and operating low Earth orbit transportation systems and hand that off to the private sector, exercising sufficient insight and oversight to ensure safety of our astronauts. As you all know, our next generation human spaceflight system, the Space Launch System, or SLS, and the Multipurpose Crew Vehicle, or MPCV, will transport astronauts to multiple destinations beyond low Earth orbit. Our first goal is to target an asteroid by 2025. Our destinations could include cislunar space, such as the Earth-Moon Lagrange points, the lunar surface, and eventually Mars and its moons. I understand the interest of many members of Congress, including members of this committee, in seeing that we move quickly. I share that interest and urgency, as do the thousands of NASA employees and contractors who stand ready to build a new system. But we cannot rush a critical decision that will drive NASA's activities for several decades. We must be respectful stewards of taxpayer dollars. As I have said time and time again, Our new systems must be affordable, sustainable, and realistic. One of the most important lessons we learned from Constellation is that a space launch system will only be successful if multiple Congresses and multiple administrations provide adequate funding. In late May, after careful analysis and deliberations by my senior management team, I accepted the Orion-based reference vehicle design, first outlined in NASA's January 2011 report to Congress as the agency's MPCV. Orion was already being built to meet the requirements of a deep space vehicle, and our contract with Lockheed Martin Corporation maps well to our capsule requirements. We have also been working expeditiously to complete assessments of SLS design options and develop a final integrated proposal for it and the MPCV Orion. Of course, we were constrained in this work to some degree by the 2010 Appropriations Law, which required us to continue funding Constellation-era contracts. We're making progress towards selecting a technical design approach that will be evolvable over time to meet our goals and be consistent with the law. In parallel to technical decisions, we're developing new ways of doing business to keep costs down and ensure agility, efficiency, and sustainability. We're revising the management of our requirements, contracts, and projects, and incorporating approaches to ensure affordability in the near term and over the long run. To accomplish all that is required to mount MPCV and SLS, NASA put together a series of teams to evaluate and compare various options and evaluate the risks, uncertainty, and relative advantages and disadvantages of alternatives for this integrated system. We have also sought input from industry and are considering an early flight program for SLS to make the most of what we know early on. We know that SLS must be capable of accessing many regions of space beyond LEO and be capable of lifting the MPCV. It also must be able to initially lift 70 to 100 metric tons to LEO, while ultimately being evolvable to a lifting capacity of 130 metric tons or more. The SLS must also have commonality of systems between core and upper stage and modularity of elements. The system should also be flexible and strengthen our industrial base. On June 20th, I approved a specific design that our experts believe is the best technical path forward for SLS. That was an important step, but not a final decision. Our experts, as well as an independent team from Booz Allen Hamilton, are now developing cost estimates. We need a credible path to preliminary design review, or PDR, on our best, most flexible approach based on budget assumptions and our best estimates on what this cost, and how it fits with projected budgets. It would be irresponsible to proceed further until we at least have good estimates. I've shared that design with the Office of Management and Budget and others at the White House. Like me, they are eager to see the results of our cost estimates. We know that this program will likely cost tens of billions of dollars over many years. So this will likely be the most important decision I make as the NASA administrator, and I want to get it right. We must first pin down the cost of specific technical design that I have proposed. Just as importantly, we must then see how these costs fit into the larger NASA budget so that we can continue to do exceptional work in robotic exploration, science, and aeronautics. Last week's House subcommittee mark of our 2012 appropriations bill was another stark reminder that we are making this critical decision in exceptionally challenging fiscal times. I commit that we will redouble our efforts to keep this committee informed of our progress. While I would hope to have a final decision to announce this summer, the absolute need to make sure our SLS program fits within our overall budget constraints suggests that it may take longer. While we are going through the process on that decision, we are continuing to make investments such as the following. Assembly of the Orion ground test article was recently completed, and it's being prepared for a series of ground-based environmental tests to validate the Orion design and computer models. The former Ares project has focused their development efforts on technologies and processes that could be utilized in the eventual SLS configuration, including vehicle avionics, J2X engine testing, first stage motor testing, the developmental motor 3, and installation of upper stage tooling applicable to large diameter tanks. The J2X engine is fully assembled and installed in the A2 test stand at NASA's Stennis Space Center. The engine began a series of 10 test firings on July 6th. Significant progress has been made in the modifications to Pad B at Launch Complex 39. There are new fiber optic cables replacing the copper wire, and by the way, we recovered $621,000 from scrap copper. New digital control systems for the pad utilities and a state-of-the-art lightning protection system that helped us clear the shuttle during STS-135 processing. This has been done in continued preparation for a clean pad multi-user capability, including SLS. Although NASA must still finalize an integrated test flight plan based on the President's fiscal year 2012 budget request, NASA is currently targeting the first uncrewed SLS development flight for late 2017 to support a crewed mission by the early 2020s and a visit to an asteroid in 2025. We look forward to working with the Congress as we finalize our strategy for achieving human spaceflight to many destinations in our solar system. I share your sense of urgency about moving forward, but ask for your continued patience as we together build an affordable, sustainable, and realistic space launch system. Mr. Chairman, I would be pleased to respond to any questions you or other members of the committee may have.
Thank you, and I tell the members that we did not set a 5-minute request of you because of the importance of this meeting and the importance of the questions and the answers we get.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're at a crossroad trying to preserve our space station, and we're going to take all the time we really need. I would remind the members of the committee, though, that we are limited to 5 minutes and try to stay within 5 minutes, and I'll stay within my 5 minutes. So the chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Mr. Bolden, recently a senior NASA official, I think it was Ms. Garver, NASA Deputy Administrator, was talking about the agency's human spaceflight program and was quoted in the press as saying, and I quote, exact quote, "We have a program, we have a budget, we have a destination. We're just putting finer points on the rocket design." That was in the Washington Post, July 2nd, 2011. And I'm trying to reconcile these comments with your testimony this morning, and it leaves me a little confused. Your testimony highlights work still to be done. Let me reread her announcement. We have a program, we have a budget, we have a destination. We're just putting fine points on the rocket design. Your work is still to be done, including cost assessments. It'll take a couple of months to complete probably. Yet another senior agency official suggests virtually all of the decisions have been made except for a couple of minor tweaks to the rocket's design. Can you reconcile these two views? You both just can't be right.
Yet, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, we're all right. And I will try to explain that. We do have a program, and we have a very well-defined program right now for space exploration. It is a program that features a space launch system or a heavy lift launch or a heavy lift rocket that will start at a 70 to 100 metric ton capability, evolving to 130 to 150 metric tons. It has an MPCV, which is already the design for which has already been selected. And it has a ground launch system that I tried to point out some of the things that have already been done with that system at the Kennedy Space Center. We have engines on the pad at Stennis that will be involved in this system. We have a budget because you all gave it to us in the form of the 2010 Authorization Act supplemented by the 2011 appropriations budget. So with that budget and the President's 2012 proposal to you, is what we're basing our program and our timelines on. And those timelines include what I gave to you. The President continually says that he has laid down the gauntlet for me. He has told me that he wants humans around an asteroid in 2025. I'm going to put a satellite called Dawn around the asteroid Vesta the end of this week as a precursor for sending humans there. Not that asteroid. We don't know what asteroid we're going to visit in 2025. It's too far out. But we will determine what that is. But we do have a program. We do have a plan. You have given us a budget, and I'm very confident that we're going to be able to execute.
Well, our confidence is shaken some by the inaction, not just this year, but last year. The NASA Authorization Act of 2010 directs NASA to design the multipurpose crew vehicle to, quote, provide an alternative means of delivery of crew and cargo to the International Space Station in the event of other vehicles whether commercial vehicles or partner-supplied vehicles are unable to perform that function. However, since your announcement last May, I've heard conflicting reports about NASA's compliance with this requirement. So is the multi-purpose crew vehicle being designed as backup crew support for the space station?
Mr. Chairman, it's not being designed as backup crew support. However, it is, as a vehicle that is designed for deep space exploration, it can function as a backup for crew rescue.
It's not being designed, but it's being designed.
No, sir. You asked if it was being designed as a backup for low Earth orbit operations, and my response is it is not being designed as such. Its design is as a deep space exploration vehicle. What that means is when we go to deep space and return to Earth, having to go through its atmosphere, the energy that we have to absorb or dissipate, the speed at which we re-enter, the pressures on the vehicle are much higher than they are on a low Earth orbiting vehicle. So if I design it for low Earth orbit operations, it can't function in deep space. If I design it for deep space, it can function in low Earth orbit. Very inefficient, a waste of the government's money, but it will be able to do that. So it will have the capability of serving as a backup should it be needed. I would not advise that. And if we have to use it that way, it means one of two things have happened. Either all the commercial entities have gone bankrupt and quit, or we have had an accident involving a commercial vehicle. Those are the only two reasons that I can foresee using Orion as a low Earth operating vehicle. And I hope neither of those happens.
My time is up. I yield back. Recognize Ms. Johnson for her 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bolden, I'm still a little bit confused, but let me just ask this. How will the decision on the final SLS architect affect the government and contractor aerospace workforce? Will you require more people? Will a lot of people be laid off, or will the decision stabilize the current workforce and potentially create new jobs? Or what is your projection?
Congresswoman, the sooner we make the decision, the more I can say we will stabilize the workforce at whatever level it happens to be then. We are in the process of a 7-year, very well thought out transition plan from phasing out the shuttle, which was decided by the previous administration, not this one. My job is to execute a decision made by my predecessors, and I'm on the verge of doing that next week when we land STS-135, and when people hear wheel stop, it'll mean I've done my job. And I will be a very happy camper because my pledge when I became the NASA administrator was to safely fly out the shuttle. That's not done yet, so I still have work to be done. Once we put the next program into place, jobs will begin. We will begin to bring people back on at some rate. Right now, we're trying to help people transition to other places in the aeronautics, in the aerospace workforce, and we're having success at that. We placed 1,000 workers with Embraer down in Melbourne, Florida. We've put some other workers with an automobile company in Melbourne, Florida. That's work that NASA is trying to facilitate, but we don't do that. I'm trying to get people in Brevard County in the state of Florida to go out and recruit to bring businesses into the Space Coast. I'm trying to get people around the country, in Houston, in Salt Lake City, other places. I need help. You know, my job is not to go out and recruit. I need for the states to do a little bit also.
One other question. The space station has been a real achievement. Are we going to leave all of that maintenance to Russia, or how are we going to handle it?
Congresswoman, we have budgeted in all of the budgets that you all have approved for us, and in the President's proposed budget for 2012, we have budgeted to fly the space station through 2020. We have done technical evaluation to determine if we can fly it longer, and we think we can. Americans will be in space operating at least through 2020. So I need to clarify once and for all, I hope, we are not abandoning human spaceflight. We have a big job to do in operating the International Space Station for the next 9 years at least. I just selected or just approved the assignment of American astronauts to fly on the International Space Station through 2015, 2016. We have more astronauts to be assigned, and in fact, they asked me, Houston asked if they could go out and recruit more astronauts to operate on the International Space Station because they anticipate they're not going to have enough. So Anybody who thinks we're abandoning human spaceflight, that's not the case. The kids you talked about who want to be astronauts, they're not going to make shuttle because it's going, but they will walk on Mars. You know, provided we work together. I hope I'm not the only optimist in the room. I have faith in American industry, and I know we can do this. So if it seems like I'm naive or Pollyannish, I'm not. I'm just optimistic, and I have faith in American industry.
Thank you. I'm depending on you not to let me down.
I won't.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher, for 5 minutes.
Well, one thing is for sure, the United States Marine General is not Pollyanna.
Sure, thank you.
All right. General, it's rather disconcerting to take a look at the NASA budget over the years. I've been here 22 years, and I've seen so many decisions that led to nothing, frankly, except the expenditure of billions of dollars. And I mean, I remember the X-33 venture project that this big decision was made. You're going to do that over the DCX, and what we ended up with was spending a lot of money and getting nothing out of it. And there's other programs like that, and quite a number of these times that we've seen decisions made based on, frankly, pressure from Congress, not just decisions made by the executive branch. Right now, we are trying to make some fundamental decisions that will carry our country forward over a long period of time. The Russians, I understand, have been using the Soyuz since 1966, and it still is a very viable system, transportation system. We have Delta, Atlas, EELVs. These rocket systems are still very capable of conducting space missions, are they not?
Congressman, they're very capable, but I would point out the Soyuz spacecraft, which looks the same on the outside, the last 2 flights on Soyuz with our astronauts aboard have been new spacecraft for all intents and purposes. They have new avionics. One of the reasons we could not do a fly around to take a picture of the stack when we had every vehicle known to man there was because we could not bring ourselves to be comfortable that a brand new vehicle could be backed off, flown around the stack and to take photographs before we had some more in-depth study. So it's a new vehicle.
And their approach has been to perfect it, perfect the vehicle.
Their approach is unlike ours. We do revolutionary stuff.
Right.
They do evolutionary stuff.
And sometimes evolutionary stuff may be actually more cost-effective than doing revolutionary stuff that doesn't work.
Congressman, I don't disagree with you, and if you look at the SLS and the MPCV, it is a hybrid of evolution and revolution.
Okay. Let's just note that when we are now being, stampeded into building this mega new rocket, rather than utilizing the systems that we have, and trying to find a way to accomplish the same mission with the rockets that we do have. In other words, putting things into orbit and doing the work up there and then moving on, rather than doing everything in one big rocket. If we expend money that might be done more cheaply by utilizing the systems we have, is the price that we're paying things like the telescopes and the cleaning up the space debris and maybe even some deep exploration projects? Are we not spending money that should be going to some of those other goals in space?
Congressman, I don't think so. If you look at the Hubble Space Telescope, I'm partial, you know. I cannot you can't put a dollar sign on the value of Hubble and what it has done for humankind and our understanding of our universe. We rewrite textbooks every day.
Well, $1 sign you can put on it, General, is if we spend all of our money on a huge vehicle that may or may not be absolutely necessary, the money won't be there for the what is the modern version of the Hubble telescope.
Yes, sir. Congressman, I'm not going to go back and forth, but if I don't build a heavy lift launch vehicle, we don't have an exploration program. This president has given us an opportunity to hit the restart.
No, you don't have a human exploration program.
I'm a big fan of human exploration.
Well, I would suggest that we may want to explore with human beings in the distant future, but if insisting on exploring deep space with human beings eats up billions of dollars that we don't have for Hubble telescopes and cleaning space debris, which is a vitally important mission that needs to be looked at. We are then chasing after goals that are so far in the distance that we're cutting out the things we can do today.
Congressman, in preparation for this hearing, I listened this morning. I went to the Kennedy Library website, and I listened to the debate. Again, you've heard me tell this story, but between Kennedy and James Webb, a Marine, who was the NASA administrator at the time. And this debate took place on September 16th, 1963, and it was about where NASA should go, because President Kennedy said, and I quote, "Space has lost a lot of its glamour." And he asked the NASA administrator what we should do, and Administrator Webb said, "We should focus on science." And they argued. They literally yelled and screamed, and it came down to moon versus Mars versus science. Guess who won? The president, and we went to the moon.
Well, who knows what we'd have done with the science in the meantime.
We have done the science.
Gentlemen,
as a
yield.
result.
Gentleman from California, yield a minute. Aren't you saying that continue to go to the station and keep our program there and plan those long voyages, but not spend the money on them other than planning? And planning can cost whatever the Congress says we can spend.
Well,
we can't go to the moon until our folks can go to the grocery store. That's a hard, cold fact. And the what you're saying is the economy is going to tell us when we can do that.
We are now at a cutting. We are right now at a point where we have to make tough decisions here at home, Mr. Chairman, and there are some things in space that are absolutely necessary for us to do. And by the way, I happen to believe space debris is one of them, although nobody seems to be paying attention to that. And if we instead set our goals on spending money for goals that are 20 years down the line, in terms of sending a man to Mars or something like that, and ignore those absolute necessary costs that are right on us today, we are doing a big disservice to this generation and future generations, because we won't accomplish those long-term goals.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Major General Bolden, for being here. I thank you for your 34 years of service in the Marine Corps. And your very able service now as NASA administrator, and also congratulations on a very successful launch. I find it very commendable that you are taking responsibility for many of the decisions that have been made in the last couple of years. But I think that we are all aware that just as President Kennedy prevailed in the discussions with Mr. Webb, that there is a president that you answer to, just as your parallel space agency head in Russia answers to someone in Moscow, and that his Chinese compatriot or colleague listens to someone at the head of the government in Beijing. And I think that some of those decisions that have been made do go up a little bit higher in the chain, and I'm not completely on board with some of them. I see my job, part of it, I've been a passionate advocate for making sure that in the relationship of competition and cooperation between different countries, as I've said before, that the dominant language of space, or that the language of space be English and not Russian or Chinese, just as the language of aviation is English. I think it's very, very important that we continue to have that vision. And so I don't want to encourage you to be anything other than a loyal soldier, but I do ask this of you to either today or soon give this committee a high-end number, not what the administration has asked for, not what the Congress has authorized, but what is a high-end number for what NASA needs to fully fund a deeper space human exploration program? Because I'm not sure that this committee has seen that number yet, and it's not that we will ultimately be able to fund at that number, but it's very, very important to have that goal. Because just as you have taken responsibility, General, I think that it's incumbent upon us in the United States Congress to know that we are ultimately responsible for not fully funding space exploration at the levels that you all can use. And if you care to comment on that, or if you have a number in your head today, I'm happy to hear it.
Congressman, I don't have a number in my head today, and I'll take it for the record, and I'll be glad to get that to you. But you do point out several things. Decisions with reference to our space program are in three baskets. There's technical, and I generally am the one that makes those. There are policy decisions, which generally go to the president, and I act as one of his consultants. And then there are budget decisions, and you and the president work those in consultation, as we're seeing over these past weeks. So
he hasn't asked me very recently, but I look forward to it.
Well, I think you have some representatives there with him, so my job's a little bit easier right now, I think.
Thank you very much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time yields back. Recognize the older gentleman, Mr. Bartlett, for 5 minutes.
Younger than you, though, sir. No, thank you very much. I'm going to be the devil's advocate for a moment, and I want to put my comments in context. I was involved a bit more than a half century ago in the first suborbital primate flight with Monkey Abel and Monkey Baker. I was at Pensacola, Florida then. I was involved with training of the first astronauts as they came to Pensacola for the slow rotation room and the human centrifuge, and when they came to the Navy Yard in Philadelphia for work with pressure suits and so forth. There were three huge benefits to our country as a result of putting a man on the moon. The first of these was national image. That was enormously important. A second of those was spin-offs, and you can point to a large number of spin-offs from the technology developed in putting a man on the moon. And the third, and maybe the most important benefit to our country, was that it captured the imagination of our people and inspired our young people to go into careers of math, science, and engineering. I do not know how much that contributed to our winning the Cold War, but those millions of young people that were inspired to go into science, math, and engineering, at least some of those were available to our military efforts that permitted us to bury the Soviet Union with our progress in our armaments. Help us make the argument, sir, that we need to continue funding these programs. Because today, if there are spin-offs, I don't hear of any of those, sir. And clearly, nobody is capturing the imagination of our people and inspiring our young people to go into careers of science, math, and engineering. Because this year, the Chinese will graduate 7 times as many engineers as we graduate. We face huge deficit problems in our country. Our deficit is $500 billion more than all the money we vote to spend. And we are laboring to try to come up with cuts that equal the deficit. But the cuts, sir, will be over 10 years. The deficit is just this year. Even the Ryan budget doesn't balance for 25 years, and balances then only if you assume what I think are unrealistic assumptions about cost growth, because we're up against a world ceiling of 84 million barrels of oil a day. Help us, sir, to go out to our constituents and convince them that we still ought to be spending money in space flight for humans.
Congressman, I appreciate that, and I think we should be, and I can tell you that if you look at spin-offs, there are thousands still each year that come from space exploration.
I don't know of those, sir, and I don't think we're doing a terrible job of messaging this. You know, these are very dangerous missions. If 1 out of every 60 times I got in my car, I died. I don't know how often I get in my car, sir, but that's, you know, we've had, 120-some missions? 2 of them have ended up killing everybody on the mission. We have made this seem so darned ho-hum that people hardly turn on their television anymore to watch these really spectacular things. We've done a very bad job of messaging this, have we not?
We have done a great job of making it look easy.
Yeah.
which is detrimental to
We have
people in the
indeed, but
program.
it's not easy, sir.
It's not easy at all.
60 times you get in your car, you die. How often would you get in your car? This is tough stuff.
Yes, sir. It
You know,
is.
and we made it seem very ho-hum.
But when you ask about spin-offs, if I talk, just look at medical imaging, we have a young researcher out at Jet Propulsion Labs working on a synthetic aperture radar for the Mars lander. The technology there has now been parlayed into use for discovering breast tumors. Never expected to use it that way. And the list goes on and on of things like that. We are working diligently in NASA to try to facilitate other agencies' ability to talk to young kids about the fun of math, science, engineering. We are really focused on STEM education and trying to instill a desire for young people to get into that type of work. We send people into schools. We downlink almost every day conversations between astronauts on the International Space Station and students in some school around the country. We do that because we understand how critical it is to get our kids interested in science and math. We are failing as a nation. I wish I could take the blame there alone, but I can't. We are failing as a nation in inspiring kids to want to get into science, engineering, and math. They all want to be business people because they all want to become millionaires right away, and can't do that. They want it bad, and they get it bad.
You know, I have a lot of constituents who have lost their jobs, and if they haven't lost it, they know somebody who has. And I have a tough time selling to them that we need to spend billions putting a man. I think we do, sir, because I think we need to have the best image in the world. I think we need to capture the imagination of people and inspire our young people. But you need to help us make this sale to the American people because we have a tough time doing it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes gentlelady from Ohio, Mrs. Fudge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for being here, Mr. Bolden. Two quick questions. Under the plan that is being devised, Mr. Administrator, will NASA, Glenn, and other entities maintain the same role and responsibilities they currently have with SLS as we did under Ares 1 and we were supposed to do under Ares 5?
Congresswoman, as I mentioned to you before, my plan right now is that the programs, the tests that would be conducted at Glenn, particularly for MPCV, Orion, will still plan to be conducted there. So I see Glenn staying as strong and important as they have been in the development of future exploration systems.
Okay, and just to follow up on the MPCV, you received a letter, and we thank you for responding to the Ohio delegation. And you stated that schedule and cost are now going to drive the MPCV, testing, as opposed to safety requirements, which drove testing before. Could you please just clarify that for me?
If I said that in a letter, then I misspoke. I hope I did not tell you that schedule and cost was going to override safety.
No, not override it, but, you stated that the schedule and cost would drive how MPCV is tested. And this does represent a shift from Constellation, because during which safety requirements really drove testing. And if I may have read it incorrectly, Mr. Administrator,
I hope
we
so.
can talk about it.
Yes, ma'am. But safety is always paramount, and we do testing to try to enhance safety, enhance reliability, and the quality of our system. So you will not see a derogation or a degradation in our emphasis on safety. If I talked about schedule and cost having an impact, it's because as I alluded to earlier, the less money I have to put on a program means the longer it's going to take me to do that program unless I can significantly de-scope it to get it done in the time frame that I originally identified for you. One of the reasons that I'm being very cautious about bringing numbers to this committee or to any other committee of the Congress is because I don't want to end up where we were with Constellation. I don't want to bring you an unexecutable program. I'm very confident that the path on which we are presently proceeding, I will be able to bring you a program that is affordable, sustainable, and makes sense. I'm not there yet, to be quite honest. I am the one that asked, when I talk about my responsibility, to give me a sanity check. For example, when we started this whole thing, I told my team that I wanted independent cost assessments, ballpark figures, not detailed numbers, because we don't ever know details. Another lesson we learned. I should not give you a hard number on cost and schedule until I get to what's called PDR, preliminary design review. If I give you a hard number before that stage, I can almost guarantee you I'm wrong. Congresswoman Edwards is shaking her head because she's been there and she knows. So don't let me bring you a number that's a hard number on anything prior to us getting to PDR on any system, particularly a multi-billion-dollar system. If I come in and tell you that, then you throw me out because I'm lying, or I'm really pulling it out of you know where. So I'm not going to do that. And it frustrates everybody. I'm trying to get a ballpark figure right now, a random order of merit for what this program is going to cost. And I'm just not there yet. I need to have, we have Booz Allen looking at the SLS, and we have a plan for them giving us an independent assessment of whether we're in the ballpark. We may have missed something. I don't think so, because preliminary word is they think what we plan and the way we plan to approach it is pretty good. But we have a ways to go before I can bring you hard numbers, so don't let me do that.
Is there anything else you'd like to say? My questions are complete. I thank you for your answers, and I thank you for your service. It's always a pleasure to have you testify before this committee. I know that your task is difficult.
It's fun.
You call it fun. When I go home, I call it difficult.
Nobody's shooting at me, and I don't have a 100-pound pack on my back.
Well, that's
so
true.
This is fun.
Thank you so much, Mr. Administrator. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Fleshman, gentleman from Tennessee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, it's a privilege to be here today to hear this from you. I thank you. Also want to thank you. NASA personnel have come to my office and have already met with me to help bring me up to snuff on this. I'm a lawyer by profession, but I really, really love this stuff, so I thank you for their visit and your presence here today. I have a few questions, sir. You were talking, I think, about a human mission into deep space and mentioned Mars and perhaps some other locations, an asteroid. It seems to me that a lunar trip, a moon trip, might be a little bit easier. It's been done before. Where is that in the pecking order, and what is NASA's plans with regard to a lunar trip, sir?
Under the flexible path approach that we intend to use, we have very hard destinations set by the President, an asteroid in 2025, Mars in 2030, but there may be reasons, I anticipate there will probably be reasons to go back to the lunar surface for a short period of time, just to make sure that we have everything we need before we head off to Mars. You know, the moon's a couple of days away, and today with technology, rovers that we've developed and tested in the desert over a number of years now, we can put a couple of astronauts on the surface of the moon and have them roam and range over the moon to do research or experimentation, and then get them back, in a couple of days. When somebody heads off to Mars, I can't turn them around and bring them back in a couple of days. So it is unlikely that we will experience an Apollo 13 if we have that kind of failure on the way to Mars.
Yes, sir. Are there any other destinations? We talked about Mars, the moon, and asteroid. Anything else?
We talk about, things that we talk about with our industry, as a matter of fact, are what we call geosynchronous orbit as a stepping stone to going to some of these distant places for things like satellite repair. Those are technological developments. If you can get to geosynchronous orbit, then you can get to deep space. But we don't need a 130 metric ton vehicle to do that. You could do that with a 70 metric ton vehicle. You could do that with some of the vehicles that we have today, but they're not human rated. So, there are a number of places.
Yes, sir. The President in his State of the Union was kind enough to mention ORNL, that is the lab in my district in Oak Ridge, fascinating place, and it's wonderful to represent the lab. Do you know of any role that they may have in deep space research, or is there any plans for our national labs to?
Sir, let me take it for the record. I do not know personally of what Oak Ridge is doing. When I think about national labs, we are always collaborating with them in one way or another, and I'm certain there's something, but I don't know, and I will get back to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. McNerney, gentleman from California, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm over here. Good morning. Thank you for coming and testifying. I know you realize this wasn't going to be an easy session, and I appreciate your emotional attachment to the Space Shuttle program. It means a lot. I'm a little confused about what was submitted by NASA to the OMB versus what was submitted to Booz Allen. Could you kind of go into that a little bit so we'll get an understanding of the committee here?
What we submitted to OMB as a part of the decision-making process was a decision memorandum from me that outlined the technical design of a vehicle that I would propose. Booz Allen is the consulting firm that I have asked to take a look at that technical proposal and tell me whether or not the schedule and cost that I have that my folk have made is reasonable, whether it makes sense. And they go, you know, so they're in work right now trying to help us determine an independent cost assessment of.
So was what you submitted to OMB sufficient in terms of information for them to make an assessment of the cost?
I would like to think so.
And do they have a timeline in terms of when
ask.
they'll give you an estimate, or when they'll give you their numbers?
Well, Congressman, it's not just like that. We're working back and forth just as we work with the committees and we work with your staffs. We are actually coming up and briefing the staffs every time I make a preliminary decision, a technical decision. I generally try to have somebody come up here and sit with the staffs and tell them, you know, here's what we're doing or where we're going. I can't give you details because, as I said, every decision has three pieces to it: the policy, the budget, and the technical part.
So you don't and can't really give us an estimate of when that OMB numbers will be available.
That was what I said in my testimony. As much as I would love to say I'm going to do that by the end of this month or the end of next month, I am not comfortable making that commitment to you right now because I don't have the results of the independent cost assessment that I asked for.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to change directions a little bit. Some folks criticize the SLS program as a rocket to nowhere. Could you give us a roadmap of what we might accomplish with that hardware when it's available that would be noteworthy and make us proud?
Right. Early in the program, even before we have a capability of putting humans on it, we are hopeful of, and that's the 2017 time frame that I mentioned before. We would like to use that to boost an early version of the MPCV into space and get it to speeds faster than it would be going when it came back from the International Space Station, for example, so that we can do the same thing that I required Elon Musk and SpaceX to do back last December. You know, put his rocket, put his capsule into orbit, have it orbit Earth a few times, come back and survive. That's what I required him to do before I would go any farther, and he did that. I am now requiring me to put my MPCV not into orbit, but put it somewhere, whether it goes around the moon and comes back, but I need it to accelerate. I need to accelerate it to a velocity that is equivalent of what it would be going when it comes back from the moon, from an asteroid, from Mars, and be able to survive re-entry and safe splashdown.
Well, you know, those are good scientific goals, but they're not something that's going to spark the imagination.
Oh, yes, they do, sir.
So, well, I hope you're right.
They spark the imagination of a young kid that wants to be an aeronautical engineer and figure out, hypersonic, who wants to be involved in hypersonic research to determine whether a vehicle can survive re-entry from speeds in excess of 17,500 miles an hour. If a kid's interested in that, that's pretty exciting.
What fraction of the population? But, you know, there's always a certain tension between, as Mr. Rohrbacher explored there a minute ago, between manned and unmanned space programs. And I think you're probably biased in that from your experience. Could you give us a little bit of view from your perspective of what the advantages of human space exploration and expenditures are?
Congressman, I wouldn't say I'm biased. I would say I'm informed. And what I have learned in my time is that, for example, when we went to the moon, the astronauts had been highly trained in geology. They knew exactly what rocks to look for. However, some of the more interesting rocks that they brought back were not ones they were sent to get, because a robot, while it has capability of doing anything we tell it to do, and we can train them to do pretty good stuff, a robot does not have intellect yet. A robot can't look around and see a piece of rock and say, boy, that's really interesting. They didn't tell me to bring this back, but I think I'm going to take it anyway. We have to have robotic precursors. You know, I'm going to launch the Mars Science Laboratory to Mars in November. That's going to do an incredible amount of work. We're doing things with our international partners that are going to go ahead of humans. It will be some time before we're capable of putting humans in any of these places that I'm sending precursors right now. I would not send a human to Vesta, for example, even if I could. That's why Dawn is going there in less than a week.
I think I've expired here.
The gentleman yield back. All right, Chair, at this time recognizes the chairman of our Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, Mr. Palazzo from Mississippi, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your leadership. I also share your sentiments and concerns on SLS and the delays. But it was encouraging to see the American people focus on the final launch of Atlantis. It demonstrated that our nation does love our space program. They love the American exceptionalism that it brings. I do think that a lot of the American people were left with a lot of questions, and that's what, where, when, and how. And hopefully with this committee and others, and along with NASA and the rest of Congress, we'll be able to help find those answers with the administrator. Sir, you said many times that we need to test before we launch. What then is the agency's fiscal year 12 test infrastructure plan?
In fiscal year 12, right now, we will continue a lot of engine testing, both on commercial rocket engines as well as the engines that we're developing. As a part of my proposal on a heavy lift system, America does not have the expertise that we once had in what's called LOX rocket fuel, or LOX RP, propulsion systems. So I have asked that we try to find money to begin development of a LOX RP system. There are a lot of people that would love to see us use LOX RP instead of LOX hydrogen. We don't have that capability anymore. And when we talk about stepping back for a while and waiting for things to catch up, the reason we don't have the expertise is because when we got ready to build shuttle, the nation made a critical decision, and it decided it was going to go with LOX hydrogen as its focus. And we put LOX RP aside. Russians do it very well because they chose that system. So those are some of the things I hope to do.
Can you just elaborate on why it's important to test before you launch?
Because you don't want to have something happen. It's sort of the way people put it. I'd much rather be on the ground wishing I were in the air than in the air wishing I were on the ground. When I test on the ground, as we did with the AJ-26, we've had incredible success testing the AJ-26 for Aerojet and Orbital. We had a mishap with the AJ-26 engine. I would much rather have that occur and find out that there is something wrong than have it occur on the launch platform at Wallops, where the nation has a significant investment in the infrastructure there. You know, so it's really important that we test things to see if we can wring out all the potential problems before we put it on a vehicle or try to put it in space.
I have a question regarding the fiscal year 11 operating plan that was recently sent to Congress. The 3-page spreadsheet noted as Enclosure 1 indicates that the multi-purpose crew vehicle and the Space Launch System are due to receive amounts that are quite close to amounts stipulated in the continuing resolution. But details provided in Enclosure 2 suggest that resources will be moved out of the Space Launch System line to other projects and activities. It's unclear to me, even being a CPA, exactly where and how much money is actually moving from SLS to support activities in other accounts. So for the record, I request that NASA provide a detailed accounting of exactly how much money will be expended on development of SLS hardware, how much money is being moved to other accounts, the distribution of funding by center, the names of those accounts, and for what purpose, and how much money is planned to be rolled into fiscal year 2012. Would you please provide this information?
So I'll take that for the record and provide it. As a precursor, however, what you're talking about is ground systems for SLS. And unlike Constellation, where we had separate programs, in the SLS, the ground systems are rolled into the program. So the cost is in SLS, not any separate program the way it was with Constellation.
Okay. But you'll provide that.
But we'll provide the information that you requested.
Right. Of course, I make that request, Mr. Administrator, just because, we have to capture America's imagination, and we also need to ensure that public support and congressional support, and we need to be able to back that up, and it must be earned. And I do have a little bit of time left. I would just like to, why an asteroid?
Well, why an asteroid? Asteroids tell us a lot about Earth, tell us about our own Earth, but the most important reason an asteroid is because one of these days, I'll go back to what my friend Mr. Rohrbacher talks about, and we do need to be aware of the fact that one of these days, one of these rocks that's orbiting the sun that we don't know a lot about is going to come perilously close to Earth, and one of these days it may actually hit Earth. And you all laugh when I tell you about it, but I don't want any of us to be dinosaurs. Because I think we all know that if an asteroid makes it through our atmosphere of any significant size and impacts Earth, then it's going to be a dark day, and it could spell the end of civilization as we know it to the greatest extent. So when people talk about near-Earth objects and needing to understand what they are and what they can do, they're not crazy. They are people who just have a concern about the planet, as do I. In the National Space Policy, one of my charges with the Secretary of Defense is to determine how we protect the planet against near-Earth objects, how we protect the planet against things. We live in a big universe, and some people live under the big sky theory or the big space theory, that there's a lot of stuff out there, but none of it will ever hit us. You've heard more in the last 2 weeks about near misses on the International Space Station than you've probably heard in your life. And that's just because people are becoming aware, as we wind down the space shuttle program, that there are threats to the International Space Station. There are threats to anything we put in orbit, because there's a lot of stuff out there.
Well, thank you, and I yield back what time I don't have left. So.
Yeah, gentleman yields back his time. For your information, 10 or 15 years ago, we had a hearing on asteroids, and we found out for the first time that sometime in the 80s, mid-80s, an asteroid just missed Earth by about 15 minutes, and no one knew it till it was here and gone. Go back and read that, and you'll get some information on it. Thank you. At this time, I think I want to recognize Mrs. Edwards. Yeah, I'm going to, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not totally sure what to make of that. I will say thank you, Administrator Bolden, and I just want to share with you, I was over the 4th of July holiday. I was out at Assateague, just camped out under the stars with 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 6-year-olds, and we were looking up at the sky, and we were looking at the constellations, and we were just chatting, this group of young people who were so excited to be able to see out there in all of its, wonder. And one of the little boys said, I want to go out there. That's what I want to do. That's who I want to be. And it without any prompting at all. And it made me, think as we, then approach the last launch of the shuttle program, that there's so much more to do. And I know that you share that passion, and I do too. And so when you say to this committee that we are not abandoning our human spaceflight program, I want that to be true for those young people who are looking up at the stars. And not just because of the just sheer joy of being out in space, but because our space exploration program tells us something about ourselves. It helps us to see ourselves and our relative place in this universe in a very different kind of way. And so I'm concerned, and I think the timeliness of this hearing is really appropriate. In another part of the Capitol, the House Appropriations Committee right now, I think, is considering the 2012 appropriations budget for NASA. So it's appropriate that we're talking about this program and the fiscal responsibilities that we share for it. But at the same time, that same committee is looking at the elimination of the James Webb Space Telescope. And that is the next area of exploration for us that, like the Hubble, will tell us so much about about our atmosphere and about our universe. And so on the one hand, we have some who argue for the continuation of the human spaceflight program, but on the other hand, others say, well, we should invest more in things that are not part of the human spaceflight program, but that are science. And we can't have it every way. I think that I happen to be one of those who believe that we need multiple legs of a stool to investigate our universe. So I understand that when you approved the decision on the SLS design and you're basically ready to go, that your plan was delivered to OMB. Can you tell me which engineers, scientists, aerospace people over at OMB are holding up their decision to get it over here and over to you so that you can begin work?
Congresswoman, I wouldn't say anybody's holding up a decision. I would say they're evaluating just as we always do in this deliberative process. And there are engineers at OMB, by the way, and they pretty smart people. I hate to say that, but there are.
I guess my point though is that there was a promise that we would have something that was a workable plan that you could move forward on, and so that there was some certainty and stability both within the agency and in the private sector. We were told that would be the spring, and then it was later in the spring, and then it was closer to the launch of the Atlantis, and now we're hearing perhaps, I don't know, sometime this summer. And, we're, months and months away from the report of the Augustine report, and where we knew that it was time to construct, or some thought, a different direction. There have been multiple hearings here on Capitol Hill. We've looked at, an authorization. I mean, when is ready to go going to be ready to go?
Congresswoman, I hope I can bring you something, with all deliberate speed, but with all deliberate speed in this town, sometimes is not as fast as we would like. I would say, if you compare the delivery of the decision, the ultimate decision on MPCV, that was relatively fast in the grand scheme of the way that we generally operate with major programs like that. And I think while everyone is impatient and thinks we're not moving on SLS, we've made incredible progress. We're almost there. We're getting there. But in the course of starting this effort and to today, our budget has, I think, as everybody in this committee recognizes it has constantly deteriorated. When we started this, the president's 2011 budget, I would have been at $20 billion, next year. We're not going to be there. And so we have had to go back and I've had to de-scope. I put a ceiling on my technical team that put them under a lot of pressure. There's some of them sitting in this room right now who wish that Congressman Wu's request, that somebody could find me all the money in the world, because they are really working hard to try to find a way to live within our means, to live within the 2012 proposed budget of the president, which has already been, if you look at the House proposal, I've got to go back again to the drawing board and figure out what to do. So we're working with all deliberate speed, but when things keep changing, then we have to go back and make adjustments. Otherwise, I can't bring you an affordable, sustainable, realistic program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I hope we can bring the administrator back, because 5 minutes is just not long enough.
Congresswoman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have to yield.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to let me talk about James Webb. Okay.
Gentlelady finally yields back. A good question, so we always appreciate you. You're a good member. Chair this time recognizes Mr. Kravac for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Major General, it is refreshing, sir, to have you here today. And with your military perspective of coming in and saying it's not the president, it is me, the buck ends with me, and I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that, sir, and you're bringing that military perspective to the table. I also appreciate your need for good information in means good information out. So I understand your diligence on what you're trying to do to ensure that we have the right answers to the questions that we're bringing up here today, and in making sure that you don't arbitrarily misguide us on what your vision is. So I commend you for that, sir, and I definitely appreciate that as well. One of the big things I think a lot of us are asking ourselves in the back of the mind in these critical financial straits that we're in is the return on the investment of going into space. And you know, I still remember as a young kid watching the launch. I'm a pilot as well. Wendy Lawrence is a classmate of mine from the Naval Academy. Brent Jett, both classmates. So I understand space, and I understand the need to go into space. But in this critical situation, I'm looking for that return on investment. And in your in your statement, you mentioned that you have been working with other agencies, and they're interested in the SLS program. I was wondering, what is your relationship with the DoD, and is the DoD interested in the SLS program and what it can bring to bear for them?
I had a discussion with representatives from DoD this morning to make sure I did not overstep or overspeak. And so while I would not say that they have definitive plans for SLS, what they are most impressed with and what they are encouraging us to press on and make a decision soon is because of its importance to the nation's space industrial base. That is not trivial. You know, we are seeing our space industrial base erode, sometimes slowly, sometimes more rapidly, and that is important for me and for DoD and for the entire national security establishment, because the people that are affected worse are the sub-tier subcontractors. The primes have lots of stuff to do, but it's the sub-tier people that we're concerned about. People that make instruments, for example, or make strain gauges, you know, or circuit breakers.
So what do you think is the chief threat to our national security in space right now?
Our economy.
Interesting that you
I
say that.
agree with my classmate Mike Mullen, the chairman. Our economy is the biggest threat to the nation right now. We've got to. One of the reasons that I struggle every day is because I know what I want to do and I know what my agency can do, but I am realistic. And you know, although we represent less than 0.5% of the federal budget, we've got to take our share of cuts like everybody else. I hate to say that, but I want to do it smartly, and I want to be able to, you know, for people to feel proud of what we do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, sir, and I want to support you any way I can. 34 year in the Corps. I'd follow you anywhere, sir. But
thank you for your service.
But you know, based on your assessment, how can Congress help you to overcome your challenges? I understand the economy. I understand the nature of making sure you get the right money. But how can we best help you in achieving these goals? Because I do believe in the national security interest that these goals need to be achieved.
Yes, sir. So it goes without saying that a firm, consistent budget is always helpful. The biggest thing, you know, I can't fix a problem that started 8 years ago and persisted over 8 years. I don't care how much you give me. You know, we in the administration, this Congress, the American people, we all stood back and watched the Constellation program just die a slow death. You know, I can't correct that. I would love to. President Obama can't correct that. But he set us on a course right now that I think is the right course. I support the course we're on, you know, or I'd be gone. I could be with my grandkids. People don't like it when I say that, but you know, there are other things I could do. But I love this. I love what I do, and I love my people. You know, we've got tough choices to make, and as a nation. But what I tell people is, as long as I'm the NASA administrator, we're not going to back down from human spaceflight. Now, I may not be able to do it the way I want to do it, but we will find a way to do it, and it will be safe and efficient, and we'll live within our means. But we cannot forsake science, and I spend pennies on aeronautics. So, you know, I'm always torn, because if you give me $100 million for aeronautics tomorrow, let me tell you, if you want to see return on investment, I can do that. But I don't even have time to talk about aeronautics because, everybody's focused on SLS and stuff like that. So.
Well, sir, thank you very much for your service, and thank your grandkids for us because we're glad you're here. And I yield back, sir.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair now recognizes Mrs. Wilson, a gentlelady from Florida, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome. Good morning. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Always good to be here.
I don't know if you remember, but back in, I guess, it might have been 92 or 93, you were in Miami with a bunch of school kids at Miami Northwestern Senior High School.
My aunt was the librarian.
Yes.
Yes.
And
I do remember.
I was the school board member sitting next to you, and then the next day in the newspaper, we were on the front page of the newspaper. So being a principal from Florida, and because of the proximity, space travel is very relevant in the school districts of Florida. And our children have always been excited since, they take field trips, multiple field trips all the time to Cape Kennedy. And I just wanted to find out, will there be any international collaboration with space flights, and how have you set that up, and what can we look forward to with the Russians and everyone else being involved in this, and how do we explain this to the kids in our schools?
International collaboration is critical to everything that we do, particularly when we talk about long-term plans for exploration, for deep space exploration. No single nation can explore deep space alone. So it's going to require international collaboration. All of our partners, our international partners in the International Space Station, there are 5 big agencies. The European Space Agency has 19 members, so I don't envy them. They are all struggling as we are financially right now, trying to decide how do we put collaborative programs together to do Mars exploration as precursors for human missions there. And we're all working to that end. We all collaborate on education because we all suffer the same problem. This is not an American calamity, that the lack of interest in STEM-related courses on the part of school children. It is a worldwide issue. When the congressman talked about the thousands of people going in engineering in China, well, they got billions more people than we have. So it's not surprising that they have more going in engineering. They have a bigger pool from which to draw. It's not that more kids are interested in engineering. It's the numbers are much more massive. And they are doing things. So, yeah, we've got to work hard.
Thank you. Specifically, talk to me a little bit about Russia. We hear Russia, we know the old Russia. What is the new Russia?
The new Russia is an incredibly valuable partner for us. They are a major partner on the International Space Station. I would say if you want to say how does Space Station exist today, it exists today because of our collaboration with the Russians. The first 2 elements of what is now the International Space Station were Russian because their components were ready before we were. When we lost Columbia on February 1st, 2003, we didn't have a way to get American astronauts to the International Space Station, and we didn't want to deman it. The Russians were there, and with Soyuz, they took our crews for almost 3 years while we went back and worked on making shuttle available. And since that time, they have been the primary provider of transportation for our crews to and from the International Space Station. So, they are still a very good partner. But we also have incredible international partners in the Europeans and the Japanese and the Canadians. The Canadians have great expertise in robotics. You're going to see us do, sometime soon, we're going to do a refueling exercise, robotic refueling on the International Space Station. The thing that's going to do it is going to be Dexter, and Dexter is a Canadian-built robot. So, international collaboration is critical.
Just one little follow-up. We keep hearing about Russia and aggression from Russia. And I'm just wondering, has there been any thought placed as to what happens if this aggression becomes intolerable? How will that affect the space station? Is it so entwined that we need their support forever, or is it a
If I-
time when? Yeah, I need to know about.
If I do my job, and when I was in the military, if my counterparts there do their job, we won't have the problem that you perceive. But, you know, as long as we continue to work collaboratively with the Russians on the International Space Station, hopefully, you know, we will play an inadvertent diplomatic role. You know, the Russians during the end of the Cold War, I believe, came about partially because of the collaboration that we had with the Soviet Union in the Apollo-Soyuz test project. When I talked to my dear friend Sergei Krikalev, with whom I flew on shuttle my last flight, Sergei, you know, went to space his first flight as a citizen of the Soviet Union from Stalingrad and came back to Earth as a citizen of Russia from St. Petersburg. So things change.
Thank you. I believe I'm over. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gentlelady's over. Chair recognizes Mo Brooks, gentleman from Alabama, for 5 minutes. And Ms. Wilson, you were pretty well on time. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus on something that came out of the Commerce, Justice, and Science and Related Agencies Appropriations Subcommittee last week. Are you familiar with the vote that they had on either Wednesday or Thursday concerning the NASA budget?
I am painfully familiar.
And as I understand it, NASA would be cut roughly $1.6 billion, a little bit more than that. James Webb Space Telescope, if I understand correctly from media reports, would be zeroed out. Overall, in your judgment, what would be the impact on NASA if the CJS subcommittee proposal for NASA becomes governing law?
Congressman, I try to make a point of not dealing in conjecture. So I will say a couple of things. One is all my planning right now is based on the 2010 Authorization Act as supported by the 2011 full-year continuing resolution, looking to the President's 2012 budget proposal. If what you say happened, it goes without saying that my efforts to keep the gap between the end of the shuttle era and an American capability to take humans to orbit, if not close it, as we are all, I think we're starting to do, I would not be able to do that. The gap between the end of shuttle and another American capability to take humans to the International Space Station would increase, and it's untold how much that would increase. If I had to sacrifice science, which I would not choose to do, you know, something like the James Webb Space Telescope, that when we started Hubble, dark energy didn't exist. At least we didn't know about it. When we launched Hubble, there was no such thing as extrasolar planets. So those kinds of discoveries would probably go lacking unless some other nation stepped forward and did it.
Are you familiar enough with the CJS proposal to be able to itemize for us the impact it has on specific NASA programs?
Yes, sir.
Other than James Webb, we know would be zeroed out, but if you would, please illuminate us.
So I'll take it for the record and bring it back to you, but it's across the board.
For the FY11 budget, Congress proposed $1.8 billion for the Space Launch Systems program. How much of a role is the Marshall Space Flight Center supposed to play in the SLS?
Sir, Marshall is critical. Marshall is where I house the program office for the SLS. The SLS program is at the Marshall Space Flight Center. They will lead the development of the heavy lift launch vehicle and its ground systems in coordination with the Kennedy Space Center. They will integrate the vehicle or be a part of the integration of the SLS with the MPCV that has the program office at Johnson Space Center. So,
out of that $1.8 billion, how much does Marshall need in order to fulfill the mission as you envision with respect to SLS?
Robert Lightfoot he would tell me more. You know,
more than what?
more than any number I give him. But of the 1.8 billion, the 1.8 billion again is for the entire SLS system, which includes ground systems, everything else. And I will have to get back to you. I'll get to you for the record. While the SLS program office manages all that money, all of the money is not spent or obligated in and around Huntsville. It goes all over the country. So, but we can get you a breakdown on what's going to be in Huntsville and what's going to be in Florida and what's going to be in Mississippi and other places.
Well, you shared with us the critical nature of the Marshall Space Flight Center and the SLS program. Are you in a position today to tell me exactly how much of that $1.8 billion is scheduled to be spent on Marshall efforts?
Congressman, I am not in a position to tell you specifically how it's going to be broken out, but as the program office, with program management responsibility at Marshall, they will manage all of the money that's designated in the line item for the SLS. So if it's $1.8 billion, it is all managed out of the SLS program office at Marshall.
My staff has been receiving information that out of $1.8 billion, it might be as little as $65 million that would in fact be spent at Marshall on the development of their part of the SLS system. Do you have any insight that you can share with us on whether that's right or wrong?
I doubt that that's correct. I think that's a misunderstanding, but I'll take it for the record and get back to you.
If you would, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman, time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bolden, for being here today and for your lifetime of service to our country. It is really something that we all admire, and we are grateful both to you and to your grandchildren for continuing to serve us. We are in a dicey time economically. We know that. We have a need to get our budgets in order. We know that as a country. We're having a disagreement on how to do that now, but we will do that. We will accommodate that, and I believe that there is every reason to believe we will continue to have a vigorous science program in this country, because otherwise we won't even have a future economically. And in that science budget, I certainly include NASA. As you probably know, I come from Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of innovation going on there all of the time. And so my question for you is, how can, in a strategic sense, we design with the capacity to incorporate innovations that are already underway but not yet ready for implementation? For example, there's an article in Aerospace America in February of this year that outlines a program that I've been following now for several years, which is a paraffin-based fuel that has been developed with the help of NASA Ames, Stanford University, and the Space Propulsion Group. And they are about to launch within the next couple of years with this new paraffin-based fuel. What the article indicates is that this fuel is going to lower the cost of a whole variety of systems. It's not going to be suited just for replacement of boosters. They're going to be suitable for building an upper stage. There's a wide variety of applications, and it's going to affect the lower cost. But design is different because of the burn rate and the capacity. I know that SpaceX, I mean, they're not necessarily in Silicon Valley per se, is also doing some innovative things. So I guess the question is generic. How does the government, which tends to be I don't mean this as criticism, it's just the nature of government, a little more stodgy, I guess, than the private sector, incorporate these innovations without holding up the design overall? Does that question?
Yeah, it makes plenty sense, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. I have a chief technologist, Dr. Bobby Braun, who is a professor at Georgia Tech and still spends time there, but his task or his challenge for me is to make sure that we don't miss out on technological development, technological innovations, capabilities that are out there. Congressman Clark, I reminded, or I pointed out to him the last time I was here that he and the citizens of of Detroit should be very proud of the fact that they produced Robonaut 2, R2. That is innovation in the field of robotics. It's now, R2 is now on the International Space Station and will live there for the life of the International Space Station. And that came from a collaboration between General Motors and the Johnson Space Center. We are always looking for innovative ways to do things.
Well, specifically, are you taking a look at the paraffin-based fuel issue that has been, I know there's been testing with the Air Force as well as at NASA Ames as part of the planning for this?
We at NASA are not looking at alternative fuels because that's not what we do. What we look at, and what I'm certain Ames is probably doing, I'm not familiar with the specific one that you mentioned, but what most of my research centers like Ames, Langley, Glenn do is they take emerging technologies and try to help industry develop systems that can use that. So when you talk about paraffin-based fuel,
Well, SpaceX is going to use it on their next launch, but
I don't know.
well, that according to the article. But could I just do this?
I don't think so. If they are,
I'm just reading what the report said in Aerospace America.
They use a LOX-RP engine, and so I don't know.
Could I ask you this? Would you look into this paraffin-based issue for me and get back to me?
Yes,
on
ma'am.
it?
We will.
I appreciate that
We will.
very much.
Thank you.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Miss Adams, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Actually, it's still morning, Administrator Bolden. And I, too, want to thank you for your service to our country. I want to reiterate something that you and I have spoken about, I'm sure, several times. I always say it every time, and that is my problem isn't that we canceled Constellation. I understand why that happened. My problem is that we didn't have a viable plan set forth when we did so. And in doing so, we lose our preeminence. We lose some ability, if not a lot of ability. And I heard my colleague talk about the spin-offs. Well, I have the 2010 spin-offs book sitting on my desk in my office, prominently displayed, so that people can see the innovation, the creation, and the advancements, and the jobs created from this program. So when I sit and listen, I hear you say comments like, the sooner we make a decision. You're right. The sooner we make a decision. We go back and forth about affordable, sustainable, and it has to make sense, but we still haven't made a decision, so we don't know if it's affordable, sustainable, and it makes sense. The deliberate speed of this town, well then, why the deliberate speed to end without an option B? I understand budget priorities, I understand all of this, but I also understand that this is the first time in decades, that the United States has no way to get American astronauts flying on American rockets built by American engineers and scientists into outer space. And it concerns me that NASA seems okay with that. That's where I am on this. What is the intention of the administration to assist our constituents with imminent layoffs as a reflection of the poor planning after the cancellation? You realize that we have over 9% unemployment, and we have more and more layoffs coming in Central Florida, where I represent. And I heard you say that you're working with the communities in the state, and I commend you for that. I'd like to know, what are you doing with them? Because I've been speaking with them also. I know of the two programs you referenced in that, but we still have a lot more people going to lose their jobs in an economy that is flailing and an unemployment rate that is 9.3%. Each day I hear of more unemployment. So I just need to know, when can we see the plan? When will we see that plan? When will NASA follow through with last year's authorization bill?
Congresswoman, we're carrying out the provisions of last year's authorization bill each day, and I tried to mention some of that in my remarks. Couple of things. You know, we're proceeding, if you look at the timelines that I've given you, a capability of putting humans in space aboard an American spacecraft by the 2015-2016 timeframe. If you look at where we were with Constellation at the time that the recommendation went to the President to terminate Constellation, we were looking at 2016, 2017, maybe 2018. So somehow we are actually ahead of when we would have been with Constellation in terms of getting beyond low Earth orbit. We at least now have a vision that would enable us to go not only back to the moon with a system that can get us down to the surface, but to other places. We could not do that with Constellation. We have made significant changes. In Constellation, we were going to be relying on 2 vehicles to get crew, a separate vehicle for crew and a separate vehicle for cargo. Every time you introduce another system, that's more risk. And while, you know, some people say, well, it's safer for the crew, that was a step we didn't necessarily need to take. And so when you look at the SLS, it's a system that carries crew and cargo. So we went from 2 vehicles required for a mission to 1 vehicle required. You know, as I said before, the decision that I'm working under now was made more than 8 years ago. It was a decision made by
again, the
prior
SLS,
administration.
we're still waiting for that information. And that's why we're having this hearing today.
Yes, Congresswoman, I understand.
And so when can we truly expect, several people have asked that question, and we kind of have a vague, can you give us a clear time frame? Something, I mean, you say it's at OMB. Can we have that same information? Can the committee have that information? When can we expect to see something?
Congresswoman, there are things that I can share with this committee, and I would gladly do that to let you know where we are, and we will make arrangements.
Could you do that,
to do
please?
But I would say, because some of it is proprietary to the companies involved, then it's not stuff that can be shared publicly. It should not be in the New York Times. But we will work to get that to the committee. But you mentioned the fact that for the first time in decades we have no capability. I would have to remind you that between Apollo and Shuttle, you know, the last time we flew an Apollo spacecraft with humans on it was the mid to late 1970s, and we didn't fly Shuttle until '81. And that was with a plan. It took us longer than we thought. You know, we were down for 2 years after Columbia, down for 2 years after Shuttle. Had it not been for the Russians, we would have not had a capability to get humans in space. So we are looking at a redundant capability of putting humans in space. With Russians, we hope to have a couple of American companies that will be able to do that, so that we are not caught again, where when we lose a vehicle, we don't have an American capability to get to space. So we've been here before, unfortunately. It is not the first time. But we're trying to get us to the point where we have the capability to do this.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I yield back.
Gentlelady makes a good point and yields back. Chair now recognizes Mrs. Sewell, Alabama. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. It's great to see you again, Mr. Administrator. My question is really about the timeline and the budget for SLS. The proposed budget for FY12, as you indicated, is $1.8 billion. And as you know, this Marshall Space Center in Huntsville, Alabama, is likely to be very important in creating those components. And so my question is it realistic? Is the FY12 amount of $1.8 billion sufficient to fully fund SLS and the heavy lift vehicle? And I know that the timeline has moved a bit, that it was 2016, it's now 2017. Really want you to talk a little bit about the achievability of the timeline.
Congresswoman, if I can go back and just make one adjustment. The 2016 time was the time that you all told me you wanted to have a capability to do that. And at the time, I expressed some concern as to whether I could do that given the budget climate. Mm-hmm. The budget climate has deteriorated since we had that initial conversation. So 2017, for initial capability to fly the vehicle, that's not human rated. That we're still talking about, you know, late this decade, mm-hmm. early 20s before we have a human rated vehicle. But we think we're going to be able to do that. Is the budget sufficient? When we made the recommendation on what should be in the budget to the president, I did not take the largest amount. I took the minimum that I thought we could do the program. I took the minimum that I thought we could do commercial crew and cargo. And that has caused quite a bit of consternation that I've discussed with this committee and the Science Committee and the Appropriations Committee before, that, you know, I would love to have more money for commercial crew to give me some assurance that we can facilitate their success. It's not there. So what I did was I took what I figured was the minimum amount that would get me to a viable commercial capability, the minimum amount that I thought would get me to a viable space launch system and MPCV, and that's what you see in the 2012 budget. So given that level of funding, we can do what we said we can do.
How will that affect Marshall's Space Center?
If everything goes as planned, Marshall will have some robust activity coming up. They're anxious to get back into building rockets and doing that kind of thing. They recently had a shell buckling test that excited everybody there, because it showed us that we overbuild, that it showed our commercial partners that perhaps they overdesign and overbuild, because we found that you know, things are stronger than we really think they are.
Right. I wanted to move a little bit to talking about components in the SLS. Some have argued that the development of new components is more expensive and time-consuming than using existing components for SLS. With the tight NASA budget, is it cost-efficient to have a completion on the booster phase of the SLS, as some individuals have recently suggested? And would this potential competition impact costs and the schedule?
One of the things that we have recommended that I can share in the design, if you will, of the new SLS, in an effort to try to speed things along and utilize as much as we can of existing technology while preserving the space industrial base for some time, is a desire to utilize existing solid rocket boosters until we can hold a competition, which I've directed we try to do as soon as possible, where all comers can compete, to include a LOX-RP capability. And I have said before, I want to find the money, to seed money for American manufacturers to at least take the risk at producing LOX-RP engines for a booster. So the eventual booster for the final SLS could be solids, could be liquids of two forms, LOX hydrogen, LOX-RP, or if there is paraffin-based, I mean, it might be that. It's going to be full and open competition if I can do what I would like to do.
Thank you very much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes Dr. Harris, gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, General Bolden, for all the service you've given to the country through a long and illustrious career. Now capped heading an agency that I think is going to have some very difficult decisions to make. First of all, I want to thank the agency for everything they're doing at Wallops Island. It's a big boon to the economy of the 1st Congressional District of Maryland, which is only about 10 miles away or so from it. Let me just follow up with a question that Chairman Hall asked at the beginning, and which I think I'm getting the handle on. In the 2010 authorization, NASA was instructed to take the MPCV and use it as a backup vehicle to get to the International Space Station. But your testimony today is that that's really probably not going to be ready till around 2020. Is that correct? For manned flight?
Congressman, it is, you know, the date that the MPCV is ready for a human flight will be sometime between probably 2017 and 2020.
Well, 2017 is when the unmanned flight.
That's when we plan to fly an unmanned flight.
Unmanned. So realistically, it's about 2020. So, with my understanding is the International Space Station is really only projected right now to be used through 2020. I mean, it can go till 2028 or so, but only to 2020. So, realistically, the MPCV really will never be a backup vehicle.
If we go beyond, if there are a number of ifs.
Yeah. If we go beyond 20,
that I usually, well, I mean,
if we don't go beyond 2020, realistically, it won't be a realistic backup.
Well, that's probably safe to say that.
That's what I imagine. So the Russians now, we kind of depend upon the Russians for all our manned space flights. It looks like until a commercial alternative. And what is it realistic that we'll have a commercial alternative to delivering our astronauts to the space station?
It's realistic.
Before 2020?
It's realistic that we'll have a capability by 2015.
By 2015. So it looks like for a 4-year window or so, we're going to depend upon the Russians.
Yes, sir.
And my understanding, I think I read it somewhere, they're kind of charging us a whole lot more than they used to.
No, sir. They're actually not.
Right.
They're
okay.
The latest contract that we signed with the Russians was essentially what we had signed before, plus inflation. And yet, the thing that I try to help people understand, it's not just for a ride. It is for training, because our crew members fly as crew members of the Soyuz spacecraft. Generally, an American will be the flight engineer. We've never had an American fly as a commander of a Soyuz, but they do the flight engineer duties. One of the reasons we want to bring the capability of sending humans to space on an American-made vehicle is just to reduce the amount of time that I lose an astronaut to Russia for training.
Sure.
That's one of the things that's unattractive, if you will, to a young astronaut with a family, is having to spend 2 years of their time back and forth to Russia.
Sure.
It's not attractive.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much for that. But with regards to the MPCV, it looks like we're not going to be able to fulfill that, the requirement of the 2010 law to actually have that available as a backup. We will depend upon the commercial rockets and of course the Russians as backups, it looks like.
My hope is that we will have more than one American-made capability to take humans to space by the 2015-2016 timeframe.
Okay.
Which would give us 3 alternatives.
Well, thank you very much, and again, thank you for your service. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I say to the very patient Mrs. Jackson Lee, if you can wait 5 more minutes, Chair is going to recognize Mr. Clark for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield a minute of my time to the good gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Rule.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan. Dr. Bolden, I just want to piggyback on 2 things, which is, one is the paraffin engine, as mentioned by Ms. Lofgren. I met with Bryant Cantwell, the head of Aeronautics and Astronautics, years ago, and his claim is that they have solved a lot of the problems associated with paraffin technology. I brought this to the attention of your predecessor, and he went right to those problems. I just encourage you to personally take some interest in this, because what is momentum to one person is inertia to another. The other item is what you mentioned about people wanting to become millionaires. And I would hope not NASA, but somebody else kind of take a look at how many people proportionately become millionaires when they want to become an investment banker and anybody else. Because just as it's kind of seductive to try to become the next Tiger Woods or a basketball player or whatever, we need to start drawing people into things like science and engineering, just as NASA drew the best and brightest back in the 50s and 60s. And I'd really like to see that again, and I just want to throw that out. And I thank you, Mr. Clark. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Administrator Bolden, I just wanted to follow up on a question that was posed by the gentlelady from Maryland, Ms. Edwards, regarding the James Webb Space Telescope. In light of some of the facts here, there could be huge job losses throughout 22 states, maybe 8,000 scientists' jobs at risk here. Can you comment on the appropriateness of canceling the support of the Webb telescope?
Congressman, I have tried to explain what I think is the importance of James Webb in terms of opening new horizons far greater than we got from Hubble. I would only say that for about the same cost as Hubble in real year dollars, we'll bring James Webb into operation. We have made significant changes in management in the program, changes at the Goddard Space Flight Center. Our contractor has done the same. 75% of the hardware has already been delivered, and it is in the President's 2012 budget. So I guess the only other comment I could make was that it is a valuable commodity in NASA's stable science projects.
I yield my
Gentlemen,
time
yield
back.
back. I hate to tell Ms. Jackson-Lee, but I have to follow the rules. Chairman Smith, recognize you for 5 quick minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me follow up, Mr. Bolden, on your last comments about the James Webb Space Telescope. Isn't the real problem here that OMBI has not given your agency flexibility when it comes to the budget? It's sort of straight line the James Webb Telescope rather than giving you all the flexibility to maybe front load it since 75% of the development's been done.
Congressman, we're still in the process of developing our replan for James Webb, which would include a revision to what we think is needed in the budget. When we helped develop the 2012 budget, that's where we were marching with Webb at the time.
But you support full funding.
I will support the funding that we will bring forward in our replan, which I have had an opportunity to see, and which we've pre-briefed to our source, to our SRB, our outside review board.
And would it help you if OMBI gave you more flexibility?
Congressman, I always have a certain amount of flexibility. You're just. I go back to the decision-making process. It's. I have to go to them for consideration of issues pertaining to the budget that I don't have a full grasp of.
I would never admit that, but we'll hope you can do the best you can for the.
Yes, sir. I will do the best I can.
Okay.
I will.
Second question is this: there have been 2 independent assessments, I understand, of the agency's morale and trust in its organizational leadership. Can you give this committee the results of those assessments that have been done?
I'm not sure of which ones you speak, so I will take it for the record and get it back. But I can tell you, when I travel around the agency, most recently on the afternoon of the launch last Friday,
right,
at a cookout at the Kennedy Space Center, where I had an opportunity to circulate among the workforce, many of whom will not be working several weeks from now. They were upbeat. Their attitude was very positive. And
Mr. Bolden, I'm sure that's the case, but that is also anecdotal.
Yeah.
These assessments, one was done by the former senior engineer for the Hubble Space Telescope, Charlie Pellerin, and another by the management consulting firm McKinsey. Are you familiar with those assessments, those studies?
I contracted for the one from McKinsey, and Charlie Pellerin still works for us, I think. So I will take it for the record and bring you the results of those.
You will give us the results of those assessments. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bolden. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
All right. The chair is really pleased to recognize a gentlelady from Houston, Texas, Mrs. Jackson-Lee, for
Mr. Chairman.
5 or 6 minutes, or 7.
Mr. Chairman, let me thank you and the ranking member, Ms. Johnson, for your kindness and indulging me on a committee that I had the privilege of serving on for 12 years and still have a great affection and respect for the work that is done by this great committee and, of course, one of its jurisdictional responsibilities, NASA. Before I dive into my questions, Mr. Administrator, let me thank you for your keen hospitality, for a very emotional and moving experience on last Friday as Atlantis pushed past all doubts, all weather threats, and did what we expected her to do, which is to launch beautifully. And to the men and women that are now in space and utilizing the space station, we wish them well as they bystep space junk and do the great work that they have done over the years. I'd also like to personally thank Mr. Glenn Posey. I've never seen a human being work as hard as he did, and Carl Stammer, who was excellent in his work. And these are the kinds of personnel that don't say no and recognize the importance of a member who is able to see firsthand the work of NASA, and members who were there, I know, appreciated their kindness. Let me follow the line of questioning of my good friend, Congressman Bartlett. As a strong advocate of human space exploration, I can't cite the tenure that he has, but I'm really concerned the next generation of physicists and astronauts of many training, whether it's medicine, but just those who aspire to believe that it is important for men and women to go into space. I'm concerned about the messaging and what we have said, and you made a very valid point. We have been down conspicuously in our recent times with Columbian Challenger and either used another vehicle or we're not actually going into space. This should be characterized as that. My understanding is we're in this position because we did not fully fund Constellation when we had every opportunity to do so. You might comment on that. And so now we are in a period where we're looking at the space launch system, but the message is not getting to the American people that we're still vibrant, we're still engaged. Tell me what NASA Johnson, Houston's role is now going to be with the space launch system, and if any, the MPCV. We're told that there are 4 contractors in Houston, and what is their role in filling the gap? Because we will expect thousands of layoffs in the fall that are going to come about. They're mostly contractors, but what will be Houston's role as we go forward? And let me ask this other question. I have legislation. We are still in pain about the choice of the shuttle. And my legislation is a compromise. It indicates a loaner to be a partner to the other anchored, iconic city or area that was leading in space. That was Florida. There is no competition to Houston's role in the beginning of our space history. It is deserving. It is would finish the historical story, but I think my effort doesn't have to even be legislation of loaning. And I know there's some talk about the remains of some of the tragedies that occurred. I don't want to speak for or against that. I welcome that thought, but I am talking about an actual shuttle being loaned to the Houston Space Johnson area. If you can go forward on the first question of Houston's role now upcoming, and then on the Space Shuttle Loaner Program.
Congresswoman, thanks very much.
And thank you for your long and ongoing service.
Thank you, and I appreciate your specific mention of the employees, particularly Glenn Posey and Carl Stamer, who unfortunately is in the room when you said that. So I have no idea what that's going to cost me. But they are.
I'll put some funding in the budget for it.
They are 2 people who represent the 17,000 plus people in the civil service portion of NASA, and then the almost 40,000 contractors who are incredibly dedicated, who are motivated and come to work every day because they love what they do. When you ask about JSC will continue to play a critical role in everything that has to do with human space flight. They have the program office for the MPCV. They will be working cooperatively with the Kennedy Space Center that will have the program office for commercial crew. Astronauts will continue to train at the Johnson Space Center, train and live in Houston for the foreseeable future. As I mentioned, we just recently named additional crews for the International Space Station. They will train and work out of Houston, and the development of the MPCV, its test profile, and everything else, its integration to the SLS will be headquartered down in.
So will we see the ramping up of employees that are now losing jobs?
Over time, it is our hope that you will see everything bottom out, and you will see a ramp up in jobs back in all of our space communities. What I think you will also see over time is that as we are able to successfully facilitate the success of commercial space entities, you will see that those companies become represented in the Houston area, in the Space Coast area, in other areas around the country. We signed an agreement down at the Kennedy Space Center last week with Mark Sarangelo, the CEO of Sierra Nevada, to utilize the engineering expertise of the Kennedy Space Center. He had signed one with Johnson Space Center, with Ames, and with Langley. And that's what we're looking for, is more cooperation among the commercial entities and our
We're looking for jobs and people with expertise so that we can continue to be leaders in science and technology.
There are 3 things that I tell people all the time, and I promise this committee. One is that the U.S. will maintain its leadership in exploration. The second one is that we will do everything in our power to facilitate the success of an American capability of taking humans to space on American-built rockets using American innovation. That's critical for us. And then the third thing is that we are going to do deep space exploration. Given the President's 2012 budget, we have a timeline on which we're going to do that I talked about in my comments. If we get less funding, we will still do that, but the time may stretch out.
Loaner vehicle?
I don't really have a comment on that, Congresswoman. I'm waiting. You know, we have a plan in place, and we intend to carry out that plan, but...
Mr. Chairman, I will just end on this note. I am continuing to press for Houston's historical position in space to be rewarded and respected.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I will continue to reach the President and anyone else to say that we need a shuttle, however it can be placed appropriately. And I thank you for letting me press this issue, and I will press it again with you in the coming weeks.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for coming back to the committee that you served long years on.
Thank you for your leadership.
Mrs. Johnson and I have agreed to give Mr. Rohrbacher 1 minute additional.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
10 seconds is gone.
Okay. Let me just note that I am for human presence and enterprise and utilization and even human settlement in space. I'm not so sure about human exploration versus robotic exploration. But the question I have for you, that I wanted to make sure we got this down, the development costs of actually achieving a refueling capability, which would give us further capabilities in space, how does that match up with the cost, the new cost of developing a new huge rocket? Could we, or is it about the same? Is it less, or what's the...
Congressman, I'll have to take that for the record, because that is a study that I'm certain is somewhere, you know, over in the headquarters building, but I'm not aware of it. I have not asked for that information, but I'll get it to you.
I would appreciate that, because it does go right to the heart of the matter of what strategy we will have, of whether you have to launch right from the Earth with everything, or whether or not we should start developing the capabilities of refueling and then going on with further missions that wouldn't necessarily require a huge rocket, but just requires that much fuel.
I don't have the answer, and I'll get it for the record, but I will tell you, in the ongoing evaluation that I asked in coming to the conclusion that I did on the SLS, we looked at multiple scenarios, one of which was you know, flight to Earth orbit, or what we call an Earth orbit rendezvous, and it turned out that was not as economical nor as reliable as the single flight beyond Earth orbit rendezvous, the way that we envision it now.
Thank you very much.
But we'll get you the information. Yes, sir.
Gentleman has a promise. Gentleman's time's up. Mrs. Johnson has asked for a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I simply want to thank the administrator and also express my appreciation for this program and all it has done for the nation and the world and for every possible person involved. And I don't see this, though I'm troubled about the ending of a program, but rather the launching of New Horizons, and horizons that we will all see as much benefit as we have seen in the past of our shuttle system. And I want to thank you again for being here, for being persistent, and you deserve a break. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to ask for a minute, but I want to thank you.
Please don't.
but I want to thank you anyway, because I know
you have a minute.
No, I want to thank you anyway, because I know you would have given it to me. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Bolden for your very valuable testimony.
Congressman, may I ask for 30 seconds?
I have a closing statement here that I have to make.
May I ask for 30 seconds before your closing statement?
Sure, yes.
And that's, you know, I've said a lot about who's responsible for what, and I am ultimately responsible to the President, but, you know, I have served in the space agency under 5 presidents, starting with President Reagan, and I think people need to look at what our present president has done in terms of support for the space program. You know, I can't remember, I'm certain it has happened, a president who has taken the personal interest in the program the way that President Obama has. When he and his family came to the Cape after we did not launch STS-134 and spent quite a bit of time with the crew, the families, the workers there. And we had canceled already that day. That spoke volumes. The commendatory message that he sent to our employees Friday afternoon after the launch of STS-135 and continued his promise and his challenge to us to send humans to an asteroid Mars is more than I can remember from any of the total of 5 presidents for whom I've worked. So I do like to give credit where credit is due.
I thank you. I don't agree with you, but I do thank you. General Bolden, I would just implore you to get a final decision out as soon as you can, tomorrow, maybe day after, whenever you can. But Congress takes a real high priority on closing the gap and having a backup system. And given all that's been achieved under the Constellation program, good or bad, mistakes were made and all that, I know. But it shouldn't take a year's worth of deliberations to come up with an architecture that'll sometime, some respects, resemble components of Constellation or whatever follows Constellation. We have a workforce, we have an industrial base that's critical to our nation's security and economic well-being, and their future is being heavily impacted by NASA's indecision. And whoever wrote this for me also said, I hope you'll take that message back to the White House. I'm not saying I hope you'll take that message back to the White House because you opened your statement saying that the buck stopped with you. I don't really truly agree with that, but I do say to you, because of your service and because of your outstanding, your heroic service to this country, the years you gave, you put your life in the hands of battling the enemy, and people have admired you. 3 times you strapped to one of our spacecraft, didn't know for sure positive that you were going to get back 4 times. People admire you and almost worship you, and you've always been capable of friendship, and I think that's the reason that we've tried to be factual with our questions here, not mean or unkind, but trying to extract and not asking, we're begging for information. As Mrs. Adams said, who represents an area that she's fearful, and anxious, and asks you when, and you said if you look at this or look at that, or if you look at the Constellation, I just urge you to look at Congress and what Congress has asked you to do already and has been agreed by both sides. Help us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
And at this time, we do close out. Members of the committee will have an additional questions for you, Mr. Bolden. We'll ask you to respond to them. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments from members, and we thank you.
Congressman, thank you very much.